For all of you who just randomly stumbled upon this video, let me just make one thing clear. I'm not what somebody would call an expert. I dedicated a whole stories episode to how I didn't play ranked in 20 seasons while trying to climb my way back into Masters. Which raises the question, why the heck do I constantly end up in top 500 lobbies? Honestly, beats me. Our Lord and Savior Jeff Kaplan at some point decided that your MMR isn't something that should decay, meaning that for somebody like me who just barely got to 4,000 the last time he played, even 20 seasons later, the game believes I can continue to play in that rank. Combine that with the fact that EU players are fleeing to North American servers in hopes of improved communication, leaving my homeland barren and in dire need of players to fill out the queue, and we got ourselves a great tinfoil theory as to why this is happening to me. But things get a bit more exciting when said EU players are returning to their native ping, just to find out that Masters players have invaded their home ranking, and one such player is Dafran. While this isn't the first time that I ended up in a high elo game with a streamer, it is the first time that they are on the enemy team, and there had been heavy accusations of stream sniping. So we are going to do our investigative duty to find out if Dafran actually got stream sniped, while I'm trying not to embarrass myself in a lobby that I had no right being in. Ladies and gentlemen, our story today takes place on Hanamura. Now, just to adjust your expectations accordingly, this is not going to be your standard 2CP Stories episode. Everyone in this lobby was exponentially more competent than me, so needless to say that it ended up being, well, one of those types of games. In an attempt of not sabotaging this match any more than I am anyway, I submitted to starting this game off playing Brig, hoping that my double barrier running teammates aren't going to start complaining right out of the gate. Speaking of gate, the round had started and the attackers were on their way to show me what a top 500 lobby really plays like. And needless to say that I wouldn't be a Masters player without me finding a way to be the very first player to bite the dust. Man, what a bummer. Guess I'll have to get off Brig and switch to something that can come back to the point quickly. What a shame. While I was busy respawning, my teammates are trying the hardest not to immediately lose the point, and I gotta say, having competent DPS players is a very unique feeling to me, especially those that actually put their skills on display rather than just complaining in text chat all the time. But as much as they were fragging out, the lack of healing was really showing, and before we knew it, the attackers were in the process of planting their flag on the objective. Thankfully, my team was very actively communicating in voice chat, meaning as I rolled my way back out of our spawn, I already knew who I should target. The Baptiste was one-off lethal, and following that key pick, I felt confident that we might actually be able to stabilize our defense. But that feeling disappeared in a flash when Dafran came back on Tracer to first delete my Baptiste and then hunt me down with a ferocity that made me feel like I was a rodent stealing vegetables on his farm. The only downside for him was that eliminating our support line came at the cost of all of his cooldowns, and with no health pack to top him off, my Sigma could easily avenge us. But naturally, there was a small price to pay as the rest of his team no longer had any opposition that could stop them from setting up on the objective. The first point was gone, but unlike the Smurf-infested Masters games I usually find myself in, nobody was complaining in voice chat. The difference between Masters and top 500 lobbies was very apparent to me at that point. In my usual games, players are smart enough to play aggressively, but not good enough to consistently punish others for overextending. And overextending is my second name. Meanwhile, in these games, I find myself immediately punished as soon as I do something wrong, while everyone is approaching the game in much more calculated fashion. Either way, really, I'm just trying to buy some time here because I have no idea how to narrate the special effects cluster truck that took place on the second point. A lot of ultimates were being tossed about, and when the dust settled, the defenders came out victorious. Well, besides one lonely farmer who came back just in time to watch his team get annihilated on the point. Dafran decided to use this to his advantage by hiding in the mega health pack room so that he can strike once the time called for it. Getting a sticky bomb kill to start off the next team fight would make for a massive advantage, so he snuck around our backline ready to strike. Unfortunately, he waited just a little too long with our Echo coincidentally moving out the way the moment he tried to attack, and our Hanzo made that misplay even worse for him by sending him back to the spawn room. What was meant to create a tangible advantage for the attackers was now fully turned around, with my entire team aggressively pushing into the rest of their team. More than a team fight, this looked like absolute slaughter to me. But of course, in the eyes of those who are actually good at the game, this was nothing but a standard play. It is amazing how strong of a defense you can set up when your Masters loser player doesn't feed his brains out 15 seconds into a team fight. But don't be mistaken, all I did was speeding my team around. Usually I'm the one shot calling in my lower elo games, but it's not like I can tell these guys anything that they don't already know. When the next team fight came around, I diligently followed their callouts to dogpile onto whoever they wanted me to, while really, the rest of my team was taking the reins when it comes to the actual fragging part of the equation. Victories came swiftly and easily as I sped my team off with the high ground when the attackers tried to hit us with the same widescreen TV plate that we set up on the previous fight. But rather than submitting space to the attackers, my team immediately turned it around to push right back into them. Speed, power, and momentum were all on our side as we bled time off the clock without giving their team as much as a chance to get on the objective. But naturally, the victory victory of this game was far from being decided. Where there's a will, there is a way, and nobody knows that better than Dafran. As much as we lost the first point very quickly, our hold onto the second one remained unbroken, with every attempt of an assault failing at the early stages already. I mean, breaking a double barrier defense isn't easy at the best of times, but that is especially true for the second point on 2CP. As I sped my team into the attackers for what appeared to be yet another very easy team fight, none of us had realized that a certain somebody was missing. Until...
Wait, it can die.
C9,
Can someone touch?
Oh no.
Ow.
It's fine. Like 1 minute.
Granted, I would agree if you said that it is Lucio's duty to be on C9 watch, considering his speed advantage, but in fairness, I was holding beat drop all round to counter their Sigma's gravitic flux, and I didn't want to be out of the teamfight when he finally used it. I couldn't have known at the time that his usage of that ultimate would be completely inconsequential. And to be fair, Dafran was actively using Tac Riser to make sure he wouldn't be stopped by the likes of a Squishy. So whether he's a mad genius or a brilliant strategist, whatever he did ended up being the perfect play they needed to win that round. And this, my friends, was only the beginning. For a team that just got C9'd out of their minds, my teammates sure remained very calm. I'm pretty sure if this happened to me in one of my usual games, everyone would be throwing a hissy fit and pointing fingers to find out whose fault it was that we didn't full hold. But these guys were stone cold professionals. No amount of Masters players in their teams was seemingly able to tilt them off their A game, and as such, our attack round commenced with no complaints whatsoever. You can really tell by the way my team is approaching this fight that rather than indiscriminately taping down the W key, they are looking for openings to exploit before full sending it down mid. Contrary to that, you could open a food bank with the amount of feeding that I was about to commence, because full sending it is the only way I know how to play the game. From Masters player to Masters player, this was my chance to prove myself and create an advantage early on in this team fight. I have dove many a Zenyatta player in my time, and I was confident in being able to take on this one as well. Except, he's just better than me. Listen, this would have totally worked in Diamond. At least my inevitable feeding didn't come without some voice comms. I told my Echo where they could find the enemy Zenyatta, and utilizing the broken heroes kit, he turned the old robot monk into a glorified recycling bin. But of course, we weren't the only ones making use of overpowered DLC heroes, and was none other than Dafran who snuck up behind my team to equalize the engagement. As much as he tried to chase down Baptiste as well, few things are as powerful as immortality, meaning he also ended up taken out. I was already on my way back to the front line by the time all of that went down, and thanks to the power of highly caffeinated beverages and speed, I could join my teammates just in time to crush what little resistance was left on the point. It was a bit of a messy fight if you wanted to break it down, but I suppose the result speaks for itself, because our team assembled on the objective to secure the cap in no time at all. Of course, we weren't planning to get off the gas, but it was obvious at that point that the blue team was lacking agency. Agency that Dafran tried to make up for by securing a vital pick on our Baptiste. Naturally, my entire team knew that they couldn't successfully assault point B without their main support backing them up, and in an attempt of not losing our momentum entirely, they decided to slow down. But going slow wasn't something that I was capable of, as I yeeted myself across the battlefield to go for what I assumed was a big brain play of pushing the enemy Sigma into my team, just that my team was nowhere near me. Where this would usually be an inconsequential misplay in Diamond and Masters, I kind of forgot that top 500 hitscan players actually know how to land their shots, and as such, I felt myself eliminated. As much as what I did was a gross misplay, it gave the blue team a lot of confidence that prompted them to push into the rest of my team. Except my team was much better at handling that situation and they were on their offense. Rather than securing this team fight, they fed themselves into the grinder and somehow we came out on top. Talk about making the best out of your situation, my team immediately took the fight to the objective, where once again a firework of ultimates would push the blue team into a corner that they had a very hard time getting out of. Having learned absolutely nothing, of course I ran into the enemy backline once again, but the least I could do was disrupt their squishies. My number one priority was making sure that the rest of my team could continue doing their thing, and said thing would be much easier to achieve once I got rid of their bongo. While I didn't end up being much more than a glorified distraction, my team sure as heck wasn't bothered by any of that, as they continued to showcase their obvious superiority, and at last, victory on this round was ours. But the really interesting thing about this was that, while we definitely lost point B in much more ridiculous fashion, for some reason the blue team didn't handle their loss quite as well. Now, I'm not what one would call an avid Dafran viewer, simply because I spent my entire time watching Echoflex instead, but last time I tuned into a stream, he was playing Bastion whenever he felt like the game was lost anyway. Needless to say that Bastion is a really bad pick outside a few cheese strats, meaning it isn't far-fetched to assume that he wasn't having a good time. Which really begs the question of, how the heck did we lose this round? Listen, as fun as it would be to try and post-rationalize how I managed to be the first one planted on the floor again, instead I would like to take this opportunity and talk about that. Yes, that. Apparently, somebody on my team was stream sniping, which really came as a surprise because if they were, they sure as heck didn't relay any useful information to the rest of the team. But let's find out what prompted Dafran to make that accusation in the first place. So at one point during this attack round, in an attempt to contribute to his team's victory, Dafran decided to head on over to our spawn to ensure that we couldn't continue contesting the first point. With him sitting there motionless, it would be easy to catch at least one player off guard before we realize that he's sitting there, but for some reason, Baptiste knew exactly what to expect. A stream sniper? Let's find out. So while Dafran was making his way into enemy territory, he was fighting our Hammond who made a call out.
There's a bastion in our spawn.
On top of that, Blizzard just recently fixed the broken audio in the game, meaning sound cues coming from your character, including footsteps, are now much more audible. But he was sitting still, you might say. Well, as you can see here, Dafran was setting up into turret mode at the exact time that our Baptiste respawned, which is something that makes a considerable amount of noise. Without all of that context, it will be very easy to believe that his streams are— okay, never mind, he's definitely pulling up the stream right now. Alright, so there's strong evidence suggesting that at least one player on my team was sniping, which actually makes it even more sad that we got absolutely rolled that round. Anyway, I'm already 5 pages into the script and there are more rounds to go, so feel free to grab yourself a drink because we are nowhere near the end just yet. My team's game plan for this attack run was to avoid taking a full-blown team fight until we had some ultimates. That makes a lot of sense considering the fact that a fully pocketed Bastion defense is extraordinarily good at winning dry pushes. Of course, my hero of choice was not exactly ideal for a plan like that, and since Dafran wasn't on Tracer, there really was no good reason for me to not play Zenyatta. I don't know exactly why I continued to play Lucio, but either way, it is what it is, and as such, we were sitting in the choke in an attempt of charging Baptiste's ultimates. Eventually, we slowly inched our way past the choke point as our bank of ultimates began reaching critical mass, because no amount of pressing Q is going to make a difference if we can't get into a position to use them effectively. Our Baptiste dropping his garage door meant go time, and because I have absolutely no concept of ability tracking, I tried to go for the enemy Orisa, who of course used the Fortify to avoid getting booped off. But the real victory here was the defender's use of ultimate abilities. Our investment in this teamfight was absolutely minimal, while all of them smashed the Q button indiscriminately, eventually ending up with none of them left in their bank. Having the speed advantage, of course our intention was to build on their misplay and return for another go as quickly as possible, but little did we know at that point that Dafran's doing would play a very important role in our plan. I'm just gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he was reading a donation or something. Since Dafran was no longer there to keep us at bay, there was absolutely nothing stopping us from speed boosting onto the objective, where for the first time in this game, I finally began trying to find a balance between redditing and not feeding. I was absolutely itching to find an opening, but knew that I had to restrain myself. My patience would eventually be rewarded when I slid my way into their backline to take out both of their supports. My Baptiste became a casualty during this engagement, meaning once we had captured the objective, I went back to our old spawn to make sure he gets to join the fun. At least being a taxi isn't something I can mess up, but while I was escorting my Baptiste back to the rest of our team, the defenders were setting up yet another very special kind of defense. Thankfully, our Echo was sneaking about in their backline, and when they heard the stomping of a robot up on high, a callout was made that then later got confirmed by a sonic arrow. Obviously, Dafran wouldn't expect to have the surprise factor on his side anyway, considering the fact that our Baptiste was definitely stream sniping, but at least I can safely say that we found out about their plan without cheating. Needless to say that their defense setup didn't succeed thanks to our intel, and as was common practice in this match at that point, we captured the objective thanks to the use of many ultimate abilities that were aiming to crush their respawn advantage. It is moments like these that I'm really glad to be a YouTuber more than a streamer. Dafran and his team must have gone full paranoid, because looking at their spawn in the replay, you can see them faking a dive comp before making a swap to double barrier at the very last second. I really wish he knew what was going on in our voice chat in the meantime, because our stream sniper had still not given us any useful information whatsoever, while all of us were discussing how we should be dealing with yet another Bastion offense. Not being aware of the impeding Symmetra play, you can guess how very surprised I was to find their entire team teleporting themselves right next to me as the roles of defender and attacker were being switched around. Thankfully, my Zenyatta experience absolutely dwarfs my Lucio playtime, meaning for once I wouldn't be the first one to bite the dust as my tanks rushed on over to contest the assault. Though I have to say that their thoughtfulness and patience really was that of top 500 players, because none of them needlessly tossed themselves at the objective when they didn't have to. Ultimately, all we did was bait out their cooldowns to create an opening for our Echo to fly in from behind and begin annihilating them from an angle they didn't expect. While we successfully defended the objective, we did give them about 99% capture percentage in the process, and you can be certain that the attackers won't be satisfied with that. Dafran came back with a vengeance, and me being a lonely Zenyatta player, of course I was his prime target, but thankfully he never managed to close the distance before being eliminated. The rest of his team, however, completed the dive that he tried to initiate, and there was no force in this universe powerful enough to allow me to stay alive. That desperate attack was their last chance at redemption, but sadly for them, my team was the one that stood on the point when the dust settled. But 99 capture percentage is nothing to sneeze at, meaning we had one last challenge to complete before we can call ourselves victorious. This game had gone on for far too long already. Nobody wants to be on the losing side at the end of a 25-minute 2CP match, and as such, there was nothing that fired us up quite like our hatred for the game mode we were forced to play. But of course, the defenders must have shared those feelings. They were fighting tooth and nail for that 99% cap, and with that, they managed to ensure that there would be no draw taking place today. If there's one thing I respected about this team, it's their tenacity. Their composition was built around punishing us for engaging, but instead, they turned the table around and aggressively pushed onto our Orisa. Was it not for our Baptiste Immortality field, chances are that we would have lost the game then and there, but alas, the defenders had no choice but to retreat. And with the clock ticking down dangerously quickly, it was time for the final team fights.
Nice pick. Nice, okay, just play slow.
Play slow, play slow, play slow.
No wall, no wall.
We've got 10 seconds actually to go.
Run one.
Echo, you need to touch.
Me.
Can someone touch you?
Echo.
Pick one. Nice. McCree left side.
It is safe to say that this was the least chaotic final fight of a round we had this entire game. It wasn't bombastic and epic to any capacity, but instead strict and calculated, with us winning on the back of exploiting the defenders' mistakes more than making flashy plays. At the time of playing, I was relieved to end off another top 500 game without being the reason we lost, but now that I'm making this video, in hindsight, this victory was definitely soured thanks to our stream sniper. I highly doubt that Dafran and his viewers would have the patience to sit through such a long and boring video, and I doubt he even remembers this match, but if he does end up seeing it, at least know that the guy stream sniping on our team definitely didn't do it to give us an advantage. He was clearly just trying to mess with you. Well, I doubt that makes it better, but anyway. You could argue that what he did was inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, especially because he didn't tell us anything useful at all, but that doesn't really make it better for me. I definitely feel bad for streamers who have to deal with things like that on a daily basis, but ultimately, this is how our story ends. And hey, if you enjoyed this one, then do let me know by dropping me a like on your way out. Consider subscribing if you want to see more, and definitely hit that bell icon to not miss out on my next upload. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and until next time, peace!